Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 News. Christian Horner and Toto Wolff are at it again, this time arguing over the 2026 engine regulations. Horner and Verstappen both say they're terrible, they need to change ASAP, they're going to ruin the sport. Toto Wolff reckons the only reason why they're saying that is because their engine project is way behind schedule, way behind targets, and that they're going to struggle come 2026. Can they both be right on this to some degree? Very much intrigued to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. If you guys missed this is the special Silverstone livery from the McLaren. They're going back to Chrome in partnership, of course, with Google Chrome. This, for many of you guys that are my age, will be the iconic livery. This Chrome Vodafone McLaren is my favourite livery ever, hands down, and it makes sense. It was kind of when I was first getting into the sport. Beautiful car, and they're bringing back and inspired by this design for the Silverstone Grand Prix. It's going to look like this. It's not quite the same as it was before. I think they tried as best they can, but there's some rules in place from Formula 1 preventing you from changing everything, so it's partially chrome. It's actually quite chrome, but they're keeping quite a lot of papaya because they kind of have to, unfortunately. But that's what the McLaren is going to look like this upcoming weekend. They'll also hope that they can get even faster, right? Because Mercedes are bringing upgrades that they need to do bits this weekend for sure, and McLaren were, according to the data, maybe this is just Norris being built different around Austria, but they were the third fastest team, just behind Ferrari, obviously far behind Red Bull, but Aston Martin apparently slower than them, and then it was, what, Mercedes, I guess. Beyond that, the British squad confirms more updates in the works because I believe 50% of the total upgrade package they're bringing arrived in Austria, another 25% here, and I think another 25% in Hungary. So the McLaren is going to be very different, and it's meant to be getting even better, which is quite exciting, it's got to be said. Ferrari also bringing a lot here to Silverstone as well. Big developments here, new beam wing. Mercedes is going to be a front wing change for them that's going to affect the airflow across a lot of the car. They believe that's going to be a big deal for them. But also it's said here that after Silverstone, the Ferrari development will not stop. So Mercedes have pretty much said that the upgrades they bring for Silverstone and Spa will be the last that they really do to this year's car. They hope that it's good enough to win something at some point, but their focus really is on next year. Whereas Ferrari apparently are going to keep on going. So maybe by the end of the season, they are the most likely team to beat Red Bull in a race. Will they be as well positioned for next year as Mercedes and Red Bull will be by starting the W15 and the RB20 respectively way earlier? That's a question for another day. Quick note as well on the cost cap. This is the first little Wolff versus Horner beef of the day, and they're talking about the cheating, basically cost cap cheating, right? We saw the new updates recently that the FIA are clamping down on teams getting around the cost cap by developing things that could be useful in Formula 1 in other areas. Red Bull have made some road cars, Mercedes are getting involved in the Ineos boat projects, Ferrari are doing their hypercar projects, right? Like all these top teams are pretty interesting, are doing things that have other benefits that could be brought to Formula 1 in other areas around about a similar time to when the cost cap is coming into effect. Coincidentally, of course, James Allison just returns from boats at a very interesting time, so there's been some debate as to whether there are teams skirting the cost cap, and I think that they probably are trying to do this to some degree. It's how the sport works. But Toto Wolff says, I think so. The teams are trying to do this, yes, but the work that the FIA has put into auditing us was big work and big effort, and I have no doubt they're doing the same with the other teams as well. If someone has been cavalier or has cheated, they are going to find out. But he does say, like, have teams been doing this? He reckons they have. So he reckons that there's been teams cheating here, and he reckons that they haven't been doing so. Mercedes maybe will find something out about that over the coming months. The cost cap stuff never seems to go away. Horner responded and said they've got a big process in place regarding compliance, so it's all going to be fine as far as Red Bull are concerned. The big story I wanted to get into, though, between the two of these guys is the 2026 rule changes. Of course, the aerodynamics are going to change. Active aero might be making a return, but it's the engines that have caused a lot of controversy. So it's still going to be a hybrid power unit as we have today, but as Christian Horner says, I think perhaps where we need to pay urgent attention before it's too late is to look at the ratio between combustion power and electrical power. We need to ensure we're not creating a technical Frankenstein, which will require the chassis to compensate to such a degree with movable aero and reduce the drag to such a level that the racing will be affected, and that there will be no tow effect and no DRS, because effectively you're running like that at all points in time. We'll get into why this is the case in a second. Plus, with the characteristics of these engines, that the combustion engine doesn't become a generator to recharge a battery. Horner reckons they they could solve it, but there's 2.5 years away, so they've got to get on this quick. Now, Max Verstappen, very interestingly, also mentions this in quite some detail in an interview this weekend. And while I do think they make valid points, Toto Wolff's argument is they're only saying this because they're falling behind. Honda are likely to do a pretty good job come 2026, I would imagine. Red Bull, though, with all the Honda, faffing about, they were in, they were out again. Red Bull said, you know what, we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to partner with Ford, and they will apparently help us with the energy recovery stuff. Ford might not be so well equipped to do that as they initially thought, Red Bull. And there is a real feeling at the moment that Red Bull might have realised that they are significantly behind the curve here for 2026, and a team come 2026 might well do what Mercedes did in 2014. And Mercedes seem quite confident they can be that team again. But Max Verstappen says if you go flat out on the straight at Monza, 400 or 500 metres before the end of the straight, you have to downshift because that's faster, downshift flat out. And we'll get on to why just now, and says that he reckons that whoever has the strongest engine will have a big benefit. I don't think that should be the intention of F1. Then you'll start a massive development war. The cars probably have a lot less drag. It'll be harder to overtake as there's less slipstream effect. You've got the aerodynamics that apparently are going to be automatically controlled and apparently not controlled by the drivers. Remains to be seen exactly what that's going to look like, but he reckons it's going to be really awkward to drive, and 2026 apparently in the simulator looks terrible. So Max Verstappen and Christian Horner are going all out here that this is a terrible idea. We need to change it around quickly. A lot of this comes down to the engines themselves. So this is a video from Engineering Explains, who put this out a couple of months ago, and all the key numbers are on the screen. So I'll kind of walk you guys through it. From 2014 to 2025, the engines have been 830 horsepower. That's the internal combustion engine. That's the V6 with the turbo. And then there's been the 160 horsepower battery, which goes on top of that, right? So on a qualifying lap, you're going to use the battery and the engine, and then most of the time you're using a bit of power from the battery, and then when you want to attack or overtake or defend, then you can utilize that extra 160 horsepower. From 2026, the power of the ICE is going down to only 560 horsepower, and the battery power goes up to 470. So it's effectively half your power is coming from the battery, and as a result, you're allowed to regenerate during the lap way more energy, but they're getting rid of the MGU-H, which is the heat component that recovered energy from the turbocharger. That's gone. You've only got an MGU-K, which recovers energy from braking, to do that energy recovery. So that's a little bit interesting. And also, this is the key point, that the amount of energy that you're allowed to expel is still going to be 4 megajoules, as it has been. But the engine is, 3 times more powerful. And as a result, if you were to deploy all the energy you have at 160 horsepower, all in a row, it will last 33 seconds roughly before it cuts out. And of course, on a normal track situation, even if you have it on the whole time, you're braking, you're going around corners, you won't have, it's not being deployed all the time. So usually one charge will last about one qualifying lap pretty much on certain tracks. Whereas on the new setup, with the same 4 megajoules and way more power, the entire battery will be drained in 11 seconds, which is less time than it takes to go down the Monza Straight or to go down the Baku Straight, most certainly. So that's why Max Verstappen's saying that at the end of the Monza Straight, you will have run out of battery energy and you won't have 1,000 horsepower, you'll have 560, and therefore you'll actually have to downshift to, regenerate a bit of battery, but also to keep the revs where they want to be, and you effectively can't get to the end of the straight without slowing down, which doesn't really feel like the premiere of motorsport. Then again though, other people have other ideas, because this is based on our current understanding. However, the engines will develop over the coming years, and the aerodynamics and all this stuff will develop, and Toto Wolff says they will find ways to resolve some of these issues and be even better as a result. And he reckons that the reason why Horner and Verstappen are saying what they're saying is because their program is not coming along. And this is one of the risks Red Bull take. They're doing it themselves. They're not getting funded, they're not getting engines made by Honda anymore. They're doing it themselves with the help of Ford. Are Ford Mercedes, are Ford Ferrari when it comes to this type of stuff? Are Ford Honda when it comes to this type of stuff? Especially, batteries, energy recovery? Quite possibly not. Even Audi, there were some rumours a while ago, given that Audi are very confident they can do a good job, but there were some rumours a couple of months to go now that, yeah, Audi are struggling a bit here and their kind of development is behind schedule. So Toto Wolff says, I think it's frightening him that his engine program is not coming along and that he wants to kill the rules in this way. So you've got to question, what's the motivation? So I think Horner and Verstappen make an interesting and fair point. Based on our current understanding, those new regulations, especially on the engines, will not be as good as they're potentially being made out to be. And I honestly, like the whole idea, I know the batteries, you know, the hybrid, it's what the organisers want to do, it's what the teams want to pursue because electrical energy and all this stuff, but batteries are really heavy, and if we just brought back the V10s or whatever, then we could actually have much lighter, more agile cars, and at the end of the day, the amount of emissions that are actually, as a percentage of the total emissions from Formula 1 as a sport, the actual cars themselves are minuscule compared to the travelling done by teams and certainly attendees going to all the events. So that would be my preference, just to go full internal combustion engine, but I appreciate that it's probably not going to happen. So Horner goes on, or so Toto Wolff goes on to say, there is zero chance, capital letters, that they're going to change this. So I don't know why these things are coming up. We've developed these regulations over many years with all the auto manufacturers being involved. It was a compromise that attracted Audi to finally joining the sport and for Honda to stay here. This is the best possible case scenario. Is it challenging? Yes, but the regulations aren't going to change. They're not going to be postponed. The world needs to show innovation around sustainability. We need to reduce emissions, and we are super excited. So these are all the things that you would say if you were very confident that your engine is going to be really good, especially compared to the competitors. It's doom mongering, he says, from Horner, because you know, the drivers will have to change down gears and stuff, because he says these problems are not insurmountable. Do you really think that in all reality we are not innovative enough in this sport to come up with chassis and engine regulations that can avoid drivers shifting down on the straight? Is it real that when you take today's chassis and put the future power unit in, sure, there would be massive derates in power, as Verstappen is experiencing in the simulator, but that's today's efficiency. We're not bolting on today's chassis, which are heavy like a prototype and bigger like an elephant. That's what we need to reinvent for 2026. And whether it's some retractable aerodynamic element or whether the shape of the cars are going to change in order to meet the more sustainable world, more aero efficiency, I think that's great. So it's really interesting debate here, and I thought Toto Wolff went into quite some impressive detail actually on his perspective. And look, would Christian Horner be saying what he's saying if he was confident that their engine's going to be good? Probably not. We know how the politicking game works here in Formula 1. There's always additional motivations behind what is being said. And look, Red Bull are currently dominating this season. Absolutely, right? And one would expect that dominance, frankly, to continue until the end of these regulations at the end of 2025. But in 2026, brand new engines, someone's going to come out the block swinging, you would imagine. And on this evidence, it's going to be Mercedes more so than it's going to be Red Bull. Maybe that's when the dominance will end. Or maybe there do need to be changes, as Red Bull are suggesting. Very much enjoyed to hear your perspective in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care. And I'll see you next time.